great to be here with this distinguished group of what I think of as commercial warriors, people fighting the fight from the front lines, trying to make a difference, to move the needle in both the climate change fight and everything that's around it, and then working super hard to do that. So I just want to jump in to my first question to the panelists, which is really focused on money. So there's been an incredible announcement of, what one might think of as good news around our space over the last few months. Everything from companies going to net zero, to oil companies and oil traders and utilities threatening to spend literally hundreds of billions of dollars in the green space, and in every in the space of every company represented on this panel as well, plus regulatory and government announcements about scale in this space. And I was just curious. So I've calculated that the total announcement of this wall of money that's coming is maybe $200 billion or above. Now, I want to look at that wall of money from each one of your perspectives. And perhaps you can share with us whether you have seen any of that mythical money around your space, and how challenged each one of you is raising capital for your business needs or to scale your business, depending on your objective. And Ina, maybe we can go with you first.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, I'm happy to agree and say that there is a wave of announcements by different organizations that committed even more than hundreds of millions. The Rockefeller Foundation committed 1 billion to the fight against climate change. The European Union committed 750 billion. So there's really huge amounts that are being invested in sustainability, in climate change, and in kind of fighting the negative effects that we're seeing. Listen, I'm very happy to see it. It's a very positive shift in the world, because if you're looking back 15, 20 years ago, it was not even high on the agenda to speak about renewable energy or impact investment and so on. So I'm very happy to see this initiative. I think that this type of initiatives, they're really promoting industries like mine. So if I'm doing wave energy, but of course solar, wind, tidal, and any type of other renewable energy sources. Are we able to see any of this money? We have received in the past funding from the European Union, the ERDF, European Union Regional Development Fund, and from Horizon 2020. We received funding last year from the Israeli Energy Ministry. So we are receiving some funds, and not from the new announcements yet, because as you said, they're very, very fresh. So we're just starting the submission process now, but we do believe that if we will be lucky enough, let's call it like that, because probably the competition will be harsh, but if we will be lucky enough to win such grants and such submissions, then it will definitely reinforce our technology and our ability to spread faster. So I'm very glad to see it, and I think it will have a very positive impact.
Okay, thanks very much, Ina. Juliet, back to you. But my focus really is not so much on grants, but on equity, right? We need equity to grow our businesses. Where is that equity? Is it easy to get? What's been your experience effectively going out to get it?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it's that we first of all, thank you for inviting us to come and speak today. It's great to be here. I guess if I go back 20 years, my experience originally of trying to raise equity is that we could find particularly VC type money slightly more easily. So we actually, our first investor was a German clean tech fund. But one of the challenges with that is that fund actually went bust early on, because it found it really difficult to make the business case for a fund dedicated to only this area, because you needed cash generation. So and then we kind of played around. We worked with some high net worths, and when you're a SME, that works quite well. but we always struggle to try and engage with capital to grow, and particularly when I would say the investment market's fairly cynical. It has to be. I mean, that's its job, but it's never really believed in green. And I think we might see that shift now. I think we might begin to see that shift. But definitely, when I was raising money, first of all, we gave up working with the city. And I used to sit next to our call center, so our customers used to ring and say, "Can we be investors?" And that was where the idea of crowdfunding the business originally came from. And we became a listed company off the back of it because we had so many shareholders. And we used it to raise debt as well. We raised 30 million pounds worth of debt in a very short period of time as well. So I think I see this market shifting. It has been really difficult because there's been a lot of disbelief about the fact that, one, it can be differentiated, green can be differentiated in particularly commodity type markets like energy, and that it is investable, that it is scalable, and the business case will work longer term. So I think we'll start to see that shift. But there is a tendency to want to invest in those big companies that provide you with liquidity, and that's always going to be a challenge for some of the smaller businesses.
Thank you, Juliet. Chitra, what's been your experience raising money, and how much capital have you seen floating around?
Today, when it talk about renewable energy or you talk about climate change, it has become a buzzword. Everybody is talking about it, and everywhere you hear that there are big organizations, big corporations, even big many countries are setting aside fund for a renewable energy project. But in reality, I don't see much of it coming to the entrepreneurs, because apart from being an entrepreneur myself, I work with an organization called Private Financing Advisory Network, which is a UN organization supported by REAP. I'm a coach there. I coach entrepreneurs in clean energy and energy efficiency business in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And I haven't seen many projects getting funds. We do try a lot. We have been talking to anybody and everybody. But my experience is that most of the investors are a little reluctant to put money into actual projects, because the number of projects which are successful in the market are far and few. Very, very few of them are really successful. And the number of failures are very high. So people are a little reluctant, and they want to see a project really making money, a lot of money, before they are ready to commit anything. But what is needed for the entrepreneurs is to start the project. They need some funds. They need funds to scale up. Then only they will be in a position where they can start showing some real good returns, which is not happening. So what is happening is the big corporations, which are multinationals, which are already established, they probably are able to get this more funding. But the startups and small businesses, they are really struggling to get money. So that has been my personal experience also. I struggled for nearly 8 years to get funding for my project. I couldn't get any. And then finally, I took a debt from the bank. I mortgaged my house, and then took money. So far, I have not got any investor who is coming and saying that I'm ready to give in equity and give you this much money and show me some results. I've not seen. And I'm currently mentoring about 10 projects spread across Asia, and I haven't been able to get funds for even any of them. 2 of them are talking in the final stages, but still, unless we see the money on the table, we can never be sure. So it is difficult. It's very, very difficult to get the money, these people to shell out, probably because they look, the kind of returns they are looking for is 3x and 4x within 2 years or 3 years. That doesn't happen in renewable energy. It takes time for the projects to start giving money returns, and the gestation period is really long. So instead of putting money here, if they are putting into a software business, probably they'll get returns much faster. So any business which is in the using a lot of technologies like IoT or artificial intelligence, probably they stand a better chance of getting funding than anybody like me who was into, say, converting waste to energy. It's very, very difficult to get it.
Thank you, Chitra.
Yeah.
Catherine, over to you.
SimpliPhi Power founded in 2010, and energy storage was still a very new market. But we were looking to really remove intermittency for renewables and to create energy security. There wasn't much investment going on in the renewable energy space at that time. It was still a very nascent market. Nonetheless, as a startup, we were looking for capital and started to follow the traditional VC model. What we found, or what I found as a female CEO, is that it was very hard going after VC money, particularly as a company that is very mission-based. And in going after VC money, we might very well have to give up some part of that mission, which is to empower people and communities globally, using energy storage as a building block. So, and also was very challenging, again, because it was a nascent market. The data is out. I don't need to speak to it personally, but women, when it comes to VC money, raise significantly less often, and when they do raise money, it is less. So we chose a different path, really. We got seed money, about 800,000 when we founded the company in 2010. And today, 10 years later, we're in over 40 countries. What we did was really look at the revenue-based model. And so it's long and painful, and it's I don't necessarily recommend it. There's no right way or wrong way, but really turning away from VC funds and looking at how we leverage the efficacy of our technology to meet demands in the market. And what that did is it took us into territories that were not in North America. So we almost immediately became an international company. And our projects, by virtue of that, had a very significant impact. And so we've been growing based on revenue, the efficacy of the technology for 10 years. We've been profitable as of 3 years in, with healthy margin since 2013. So we haven't turned away from VC money, especially when it comes to this question of scale. The wall of money, I think is how you put it, that is coming. It is possible because we have large strategic partners all over the world. We work in off-grid territories, but we also work with utilities and grid-tied models. And I do want to say that these projects pencil out. Whether it's working with the World Bank and governments or utilities or NGOs or hospitals, schools, where we provide power to save money month over month. Precious dollars are not going to diesel or other fossil fuels. There is a strong economic model. And I want to make that point because we would not have been able to grow as a startup in the energy storage space if it didn't pencil out. And so that's one of the points that I like to make about our company and the markets. And that is that to the point made just before me, VCs, but also the market in general, they need to see the economics and the projects need to pencil out. They do. And that's why, again, we're in over 40 countries and work with a number of different types of partners across these markets. So I would say one thing with regard to this wall of money, and I would just bring up the issue of global subsidies. The IMF, the last number they put out was 5.2 trillion in global subsidies for fossil fuels. And I really think, again, because as a company, we're really looking at the market, what the need is in the market, but also the market drivers. And this money that has been announced can very well be a market driver. But if governments are still spending 5.2 trillion to buoy artificially low prices, consumers themselves are not making informed decisions. They may be paying a lower price in the market, a kilowatt at the wall socket or a gas of fuel, a tank of fuel, but they're paying dearly on the back end. And so really the econometric models that need to be developed so consumers in their demand can also drive the market in addition to these investment dollars. And then of course, eliminating these fossil fuel subsidies that, if we think about it, about 68% of CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions are caused by the burning of fossil fuel for heat, for transportation, electricity. And yet we're subsidizing it, and it is displaced as of 2019, about 24.9 million people, climate refugees. So it's crazy, this kind of circular logic that we have going in the market. So to your point, yes, this funding will help, but we need to end subsidies. And yes, renewable energy projects do pencil out, and there is a strong economic model, even with all these conflicting factors.
So thank you. So to put that into context, there's a think tank called the Climate Policy Initiative, which publishes an exhaustive analysis of climate finance flows every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at that in detail, what you see is that governments and development finance institutions like the World Bank are, and many others are doing what they can, but so are corporations and individuals, for example, people installing solar panel on their roofs. Mm-hmm. However, conspicuously absent are institutional investors, which are by far the largest proportion of that pie of money. Hence my question. The MB100 exercise, unearthed hundreds of amazing companies around the world doing all sorts of amazing things, and all of which share a kind of a common feature, which is that if they were properly funded, their reach could be far greater. So with that in mind, going back to our topic, which is how can we create a lasting shift in the global energy mix for a low carbon world, I was wondering if maybe each one of you had encountered in their day-to-day business a couple of key challenges that they've managed to beat to get there, because none of us are going to get there unless we are tackling these challenges effectively. So maybe just pick one challenge that you faced in the last year or so as a business of your size, and maybe share with us what you did about it. And the challenge can be a money challenge, or a market challenge, or a stakeholder challenge, or an employee challenge, or a gender challenge. Ina, you're first again.
Yes, always first. So basically, I think the two main challenges, I'll say about one in a personal level and one about more on the business level. So on the business level, I think the main challenge is that many countries and governments still do not have any policies or regulations or legal frameworks for the implementation of wave energy. So basically our technology is quite there, it's ready for implementation, and we have high levels of demand. Usually ports and coastal cities are very interested in installing our technologies on their breakwaters and piers and jetties and so on. But so we come there already with our technology, and they come with the interest and the breakwater, and then we tell them, okay, so what's the next steps? And then they go, we don't know. Because basically the situation is that because wave energy is such a new source of clean electricity, and I guess that governments and municipalities were not expecting it to start commercialization so fast, kind of the technology in its pace bypassed the actual legislation and legal frameworks. So many times we really want to install our technology, and the clients really want to have the technology, but the pathway is not clear. So we spend really a lot of time instead on doing technical things. We're actually kind of lobbying or assisting the governments to set policies. So that's kind of the problem in the business world of this.
That's what the sorry, Ina, that's what the EU is trying to change, right? By announcing 1 to 3 gigawatts target by 2030 and a huge 60 gigawatt of ocean and tidal energy by 2050, right?
Yeah, listen, I prefer to start before
But it's
2050,
far away, yeah.
but yeah, they're trying to change it, and rightfully so, because they're seeing that there are technologies that are getting there in terms of the readiness level, but there's no way for us to implement it unless, you know, there's some policies at least, or
And the personal challenge?
And the personal challenge is like really, I always say that being an entrepreneur in any field is very difficult, and being a female entrepreneur adds a second layer of difficulty. And I actually established EcoWave Power when I was 24 years old. And, you know, most of the times when I was super excited to go into a conference room and present, you know, my exciting wave energy technology, people in the room would go, espresso, please, water. People would make their orders because if there's a woman in the room, she's probably there as somebody's assistant. And last year, actually, we made a very big milestone for the company. Going back to your equity question, our company publicly listed on Nasdaq Stockholm. And we became the first Israeli company to ever list in Sweden, in the Swedish stock market. And when we finished the IPO, you know, I was super excited. I went to meet a PR company to help us achieve awareness with the stock. And after the meeting was over, I stayed there with one of the senior ladies in the company. And she told me, you know, I haven't follow the stock market. And when I asked her what's the advice, she said, listen, you have to step down from being the CEO and hire an older man with white hair. And that's a quote. And like, that's an advice that a man would never get, like quit and take like, and she said, because an older man, he looks for the stock market like an expert. And a woman, especially a younger woman, does not have the same vibe, you know? And when I told her, listen, it's against the DNA of my company, I'm all into girl power and like making it happen. She said, do you want to be right or do you want to make money? You know, like women, we can't do both things. So in the end of the day, the biggest advice that I learned from it is actually, I didn't step down. And the biggest advice is not to step down, because if we give up, you know, our daughters will give up and their daughters will give up. And then there's a very miserable chain of events where women are very, you know, not empowered, let's call it like that. So I think that's kind of my biggest
Thanks, Ina.
Thank
you. Very interesting. I can see a lot of white males with gray hair on the video here on Zoom, if you're interested. So over
Why
to
not?
Juliet.
But she didn't say necessarily white, she just said white hair. So
Right, yeah. Juliet, maybe a challenge or two.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking forward at the moment to what are the challenges to the transition and how do we navigate that. And I guess I think about it in, I know you said one challenge, but I think we've got 4 challenges.
Four is good.
Ina touched on them, but I will do it in a very short way. So I call them the 4 pillars that you need to kind of fix if you're going to move forward in this transition. The first one is R&D and innovation. So the funding for R&D and innovation in this sector is tiny in comparison to other sectors like aerospace or pharmaceutical, or any of those areas receive a lot more government funding than the energy sector and the energy system sector particularly. So I do think we need to, and I think the sector itself has not been great at going after that. There are some very established large businesses who are brilliant at going to get R&D funding, and we're not part of it. So we must remember there's funding out there to do innovation in that. So that's number one. The next is infrastructure. So the infrastructure was built in a high carbon world. So we really have to be clever about how we plug into this infrastructure. If you're going to create a decentralized energy market in a place where the market was generated, particularly in Western Europe, where you've got a lot of large power stations with distribution electricity networks that deliver to people's homes. And actually what happens on the other side of the meter in somebody's home is irrelevant. That is going to change. What happens on the other side of the meter is going to become more important. And I'm sure Catherine's, because she'll mention later, but that infrastructure is no longer fit for purpose in this low carbon world. The next one is that we have in the UK alone, and I know it's across Europe as well, 11,000 pages of regulation. So if you're an innovative company that you're trying to challenge this marketplace, then it's super hard, not only to figure out whether the regulation is going to get in the way, but also there's no data available. So all the data and the systems and how the energy systems work in the UK is not available, that's held. And for me, the last thing, but obviously the most important, because we're a consumer-led organization, is the customer. So we've seen continual greenwashing in the UK, where people make environmental claims, but actually they're not really environmental. And I think this is going to be an increasing part of this. So one of the things we're campaigning for is to make sure there is consumer protection, particularly around green claims and green goods, so that when a consumer, whether it's a business consumer or a domestic consumer, when they go and buy something, they know it does what it says on the tin.
Thank you so much. That was quite comprehensive. I like the fact that regulations so far is a consistent theme, because top-down change is very powerful when it happens. As we can see with phasing out, for example, petrol cars around the world.
Yeah.
Chitra?
See, for me, there are two challenges which I faced, and which is very specific to my business. The first was the technological challenges, because even though I convert organic waste into bio-CNG, so the technology is not rocket science. It's been there for quite some time, but the machinery which is available in the market is not up to the standard. Because even though it's successful in, say, Sweden or Germany or US, and even China has done excellent work, but the technology or the machinery which is needed for it changes with the quality of waste which you are using, the kind of waste which you are using, the ambient temperature which is needed for that. So the technology which was available for me off the shelf in India just didn't meet the standards. And I, being the first generation entrepreneur, I burnt my hand. I bought these things, and then I realized it's not working. And I tried my best. I sunk in more and more money. It didn't work. Finally, I had to scrap the whole thing. And then I started from scratch, and I designed these purification units and the compression unit which is needed. And today I have my own design and design team. We manufacture these equipments, which currently I'm using for my plant, but today I'm in a position to offer it to others. So anybody else, especially in India, if they are getting into this field and they need help, I'm there to help them. The second thing, a problem which I've faced is what I was discussing before with you in the green room, is that raising funds. See, I have a background. I come from the IT industry. I was in the IT industry for 20 years. I worked in blue chip companies like HP and Compaq, and I have a PhD in organizational leadership. With this, and I have managed teams across continents. And at one point of time, I had 500 people reporting to me. With this background, I thought that I have one of the best projects in my hand, because when I was trying to raise funds for my project, I had already won 2 or 3 international awards for my business plan. So I thought I just have to walk into any bank or any financial institution and they'll be giving the money to me, because what more can you ask for? I have the background, I have the experience, I have everything. And I wasn't, for a shock, because every one of them refused to give me the money. They said, look, why are you in this business? You are a woman. Women don't do this kind of a business. Why don't you start a jewelry business or get into garments or into fashion products? Renewable energy is not for women. And then there are people who ask me, I say, look, your husband is not in the business. You are running it alone. Why? Is there a problem? Are you getting separated from your husband? Or is it that he doesn't believe in your business? He doesn't want to put in money, but you expect us to put in money for your business. So these are the kind of questions they asked. Ridiculous. I don't think any man has ever asked whether will you be committed to your business. There are people who ask me, look, you have young children. If we give you money today and tomorrow you decide that you want to focus on your children and shut it down? Do you ask a man? It's like, well, how committed is he to the business vis-a-vis his family? It's not that men don't change their mind about running the business and shut down for whatever reason. But I was asked these kind of questions, and it took me 4 years to even realize that the whole problem is not because my technology is not good, or I don't have the experience. It's just because I don't have the gender which they are looking for. So finally, I had only 2 choices. Either I shut down, I decide not to continue with the business, or I find a way to circumvent this. So what I did was I asked 2 of my colleagues from the IT industry, men. I didn't want my husband to be a part of it, because everybody will again say that it's my husband who is driving the business and I happen to be as an appendage to him. So I asked 2 of my colleagues. So and they joined, and then that's how I got my funding from the bank.
Thanks very much. Well, listen, the good news from my experience is that the DNA of the green industry actually is about gender balance, is about diversity, is about a circular economy, unlike our friends over at the fossil fuel industry. So, Catherine, over to you for one or two challenges. I think we're almost out of time, but we'll just keep going until Tom stops us.
Okay. So the biggest challenge I think that we have faced, and I think you framed it within the last year and a half, 2 years, and certainly with COVID, the use of energy and economic recovery is so critical all over the world. But this issue of regulation and codes, compliance, and I think, not to take you on, but I believe you said top-down change is so significant, as if change in regulation is top-down. Indeed, it can be, but we're finding as a company, because again, we're looking at businesses, hospitals, schools, communities, homeowners, the customer's site, the regulations, codes, compliance are stopping at the bottom, sort of the grassroots level. So regulation can impact markets in a very negative way, whether it's top down or bottoms up. And so the challenge for us as a company has really been about dealing with regulation. In part because of what I had mentioned before, these projects pencil out, whether they're small for homeowners because of rising costs that are grid tied, time of use, demand charges, businesses grid tied, time of use, demand charges, peak shaving, but also off grid. And again, for hospitals, schools, and remote communities all over the world, diesel offset, not having to spend those precious dollars on fuel and instead on programmatic or other types of supplies. Even with economics proving out, we bump up against regulation over and over again, interconnection requirements, what is allowed and what is not. And what was mentioned before in this issue around the consumer and consumer choice, again, for us as a revenue-based company growing internationally, we're always looking at what the consumer is requesting, what they need to make an impact in their lives. And we're butting up against regulation all over the world. And that really goes to kind of protectionist practices. The $5.2 trillion in fossil fuel subsidies, that has got to stop. And the tax loopholes and other types of financial structures that exist for the benefit of large energy companies, from ExxonMobil to BP, whoever and whatever they are. I believe greenwashing was mentioned, really taking a look at the cost for people beyond the tank of gas, those externalities that are not included in what we consider the cost of energy or the price. Cost is not reflected in the price. So I guess my question, my answer really has to do with the discussion around cost versus price. Do price points really represent the true cost? The externalities, the tremendous fallout environmentally, the health and human impact of fossil fuels, and these protectionist practices and regulations that really create a protective barrier around disrupting this top-down centralized transmission and distribution of power, but also water and food. And we see this all over the world with COVID, that large centralized distribution systems are breaking down. And people are becoming very aware of how vulnerable they are because of these disruptions in large centralized distribution system, whether it's power, water, food, or PPEs. So as a company, we're really focused on that. And our challenge has really been to understand the regulatory markets so that we can navigate through them and also play an advocacy role on behalf of our customers.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Thanks very much, everybody, actually. That was quite comprehensive in terms of an overview of the challenge that we all face. I want to add one more challenge. So we try to install once or to pitch solar for Indonesian islands. Now, Indonesian islands are perfect because they import diesel via boats, polluting everywhere, and the diesel is incredibly expensive. I have to say I did not encounter any of the challenges that we've just discussed, i.e. regulatory or capital or technology or people. The challenge I encountered was a diesel mafia which was armed. Now that's so when they're armed, you know, it makes it even more difficult to effect change. With that, look, good luck to all of you in your businesses. I think what you're doing is amazing. Thank you, MB100, for hosting all of us.